Chapter 4. Yoongi was in a bit of a daze. His head felt kind of foggy, and his stomach was starting to growl at him, though that was completely ignored. The sun was close to setting, and he wasn't sure how far away from Seoul they were, but when he saw an exit sign that promised food and lodging, he pulled off. Jungkook had been playing with his phone for the most part of their trip, after stuffing Yoongi's photo album back into his bag. It was only an hour ago that Jungkook stated he lost phone signal, and after checking Yoongi's phone, they discovered they were both out of signal. Seemed the towers were starting to go down. "You cool with stopping in for the night? My eyes feel like they're trying to melt out of their sockets." Jungkook hummed, his fingers buried in soft black hair. "I'm hungry. You haven't slept in... almost a whole day?" "Yeah, let's stop. Jimin can wait a little longer." Not sleeping for a day is nothing new to me, but my eyes are burning, and if I don't get out of this car soon I'm going to fucking scream. Jungkook chuckled softly. Okay. Food and sleep." Yoongi nodded and they fell into comfortable silence as he took them off the freeway and into another little town. Streetlights were starting to turn on, so he flicked on the headlights and scanned for some place that looked open. It only took a few minutes for them to stumble upon what looked like a gas station, with some type of American diner attached. It looked a little dingy, and there were cars out front, but Yoongi was too tired and hungry to care. They needed to stop before his head exploded. He just needed to rest for a few hours, and he'd be good to go again. He was living on a few hours sleep for the past 3 or so years anyway. "Oh fuck, I think my arse is sore," Jungkook complained lightly, as he pushed open the car door once Yoongi came to a complete stop and shut off the engine. "Your ass, huh?" Yoongi grumbled, his nose crinkling as he shoved his own door open. Cypher let out a satisfied meow as he jumped out of the car with Jungkook and took the time to stretch out around the boy's legs. Jungkook rose his arms into the air and started to stretch himself, bending one arm over his head to tug on, before doing the same with the other. Yoongi quickly glanced away from him to glance around the area. There was a motel across the street, and he vaguely wondered if they could pay by the hour. The place looked open, if the little light in the office meant anything. They'd need gas again, but first, time to fill themselves. "I've got a piss," Jungkook called over his shoulder as he walked toward the corner of the building where Yoongi could see a bathroom sign. The youth gave him a wave before he disappeared inside, and Yoongi figured he could just wait till he came back. Cypher sauntered from around the car and rubbed against his leg for a moment, before trotting off. Yoongi followed the kitten with his eyes until he disappeared around the side of the building, opposite of where Jungkook had gone. The elder shoved his hands into his pockets of his hoodie and took after the cat, just to make sure he didn't get into any trouble. The entire parking lot was nothing but pavement, so Yoongi figured the cat was looking for dirt to go to the bathroom. Sure enough, when Yoongi came around the corner, following a cold black tail around the back of the building, Cypher was sniffing around a line of grass to find a place to do his business. Yoongi settled against the brick back of the building, noticing there was a door that led inside, and there was also a man sitting on some strange little stool with a book in his hands. They noticed each other about the same time, and the strange look Yoongi received made his shoulders come up in defense. The man, wrinkled around the eyes and greying in the hair, glanced from Yoongi to Cypher and then went back to his book. Yoongi relaxed slightly but kept his guard up, shifting his eyes from the man to Cypher. The cat wandered around for a minute before finding his place and started to dig a hole. Yoongi looked away to give him some privacy, dragging his eyes to the sky that was just starting to darken. Give it another hour or so, and they would be cast in moonlight. He could hardly believe that just 24 hours ago he was curled up in his apartment, alone save for Cypher, and debated if he wanted to keep going or not. And now, he was travelling across the country with some cute, slightly weird kid who wasn't that bad at all. "Hyung?" Yoongi slipped off the side of the building, stumbling slightly at the panic in Jungkook's voice. His heart leaped in his throat, and he quickly came around the back of the building, glancing around for the boy. Yoongi Hyung! He sounded so panicked, and Yoongi's feet started moving on their own, jogging around the side of the building to the front once again. Jungkook was standing in the middle of the parking lot, looking around frankly. He was alone, and he looked fine, so the panic swelling in Yoongi's stomach dimmed slightly. Hyung! Jungkook gasped out when his eyes landed on him, and he took off across the parking lot, reaching Yoongi a hell of a lot quicker than the elder expected, and nearly threw him off balance when he threw his arms around his shoulders. I thought you left. Yoongi perked a brow, his heart hammering in his chest as the youth hugged him tightly. Scyther was taking a shit, he answered simply, motioning toward the back of the building with one hand. Jungkook was breathing a little hard when he pulled away, and he suddenly grabbed Yoongi's face, making something prickle along the elder's neck. His expression was something Yoongi had yet to see, a bit of anger brought on by worry. Don't disappear like that again. Aggravation splashed against Yoongi's stomach, but he squished it down because, well, Jungkook was right. He shouldn't have just walked off like that. So he sighed and nodded, knocking the boy's wrists away from his face and shoving his hands into his pockets again. He glanced over just in time to see Cypher trotting back from around the building. He meowed at them before lunging his head against Yoongi's leg, so the elder bent down and picked him up, stuffing him away in the pocket of his hoodie. Apparently, the kitten really liked being there, and Yoongi had to admit, it was starting to get a little nippy outside. Jungkook shifted on his feet, watching Yoongi with an expression he couldn't quite read, though it looked like he really wanted to say something. The youth opted to nudge him with an elbow instead, and started walking off to the glass door of the diner. Yoongi stopped by the car for a moment, reaching inside to grab a can of cat food from his bag before locking up the vehicle, and followed after Jungkook, who was waiting at the door for him. The diner was exactly what Yoongi expected, taking hint from American culture, and Yoongi wondered if he was going to have any Korean food this trip or not. Jungkook brightened at the brightly coloured place, eyes twinkling slightly as he glanced around. There were a handful of people about the diner, a few sitting at the counter and a couple stashed away in a booth. They all looked as worn as Yoongi felt, and he assumed they were travelling as well. Warm fingers wrapped around his wrist, and Jungkook tugged him toward one of the empty booths. Yoongi followed along, and they slipped into the booth, opposite each other. Jungkook looked like he was enjoying himself, glancing around the place like he'd never seen one before. And perhaps he had not. Yoongi and his friends used to frequent them often when he was younger, but it had been years since he'd been to one. Hello. A woman, looking to be in her 40s, dressed in a worn faded pink dress with an apron tied to the front, greeted them at the end of their table, bowing her head. Hello, Jungkook greeted, a smile on his face as he grabbed two of the plastic menus from the little metal holder at the end of the table, pressed against the window, and passed one to Yoongi. The woman smiled at the both of them as she placed down two empty coffee cups and then turned around, snatching up a full coffee pot from the counter. Yoongi lit up slightly at the offer of coffee and quickly nodded his head at her, pushing his empty coffee cup toward her. She happily poured him a cup as she spoke. I'm Suchin, your waitress. Would you like a minute to look over the menu? Please. Yoongi nodded his head, eyes widening as she finished pouring, and moved to fill up Jungkook's cup. He dragged the steaming cup closer and picked it up with both hands, the warmth seeping into his skin as he brought it to his nose to smell. It was strong, just the way he liked it. He didn't hesitate to blow on it and take a sip, savouring the heavy taste on his tongue. You drink it black? Jungkook asked, his nose crinkling as he watched Yoongi sip at his coffee. The waitress was gone, attending to the other booth, and Jungkook was in the process of pouring little packets of sugar into his coffee. Best way to. Yoongi shrugged one shoulder and arched his back slightly when he felt Cypher wiggling around in his hoodie. The cat slipped out easily enough and just sat on the booth beside him. After putting his cup down reluctantly, Yoongi grabbed the can of cat food he'd stuffed away and tugged off the tab before placing it down on the booth seat for Cypher to enjoy. It didn't occur to him that it might be strange to have a cat in the middle of the restaurant. Yoongi picked up the menu to scan over, and he breathed a sigh of relief at the assortment of classic Korean noodle dishes scattered about with other traditional American food. As soon as he saw it, he knew exactly what he wanted. He put the menu back without hesitation, and glanced away from the surprised look Jungkook was giving him. Instead, he focused on scratching behind Cypher's ears as the cat ate quietly. Ready, boys? Sushin was back, that warm smile on her lips as she glanced between the two of them. She noticed Cypher and her smile just grew a bit more, but she said nothing about it. Hyung? Jungkook questioned, motioning for him to go first. Yoongi nodded and sat up a little straighter. Can I have an order of japchae and everything else that comes with it? Sushin nodded eagerly, plucking a notepad from the front of her apron to scribble down what he wanted. And some water? Of course. And you? She turned to Jungkook. The same, Jungkook nodded, a smile coming to his lips as he stashed his menu away with Yoongi's. Water too. Coming up. She bowed her head to them once again before hurrying off to put in their order. Yoongi's mouth was watering at the thought of freshly made japchae. He couldn't remember the last time he had a decent home-cooked meal, because Yoo Shu as hell didn't cook. And every time he tried to make something from scratch at home, it just turned into mush. So he was looking forward to it. And the coffee he was sipping on was waking him up just a bit, filling his body with warmth that didn't touch his cold bones. Jungkook was fumbling with his phone in his hand, scrolling through something on it, and there was a soft pout on his lips. Yoongi stared at the way his lips plumped out before he quickly averted his gaze to the window. You'll see him soon. Jungkook glanced up at his words and flushed, dropping his hand to rest against the table. Yeah. Just kinda sucks that I can't text him. I don't think there's ever been a time I couldn't reach him, and this... it sucks. He dropped his gaze to his phone. He knows you're coming. That's what's important. He crossed his arms over his chest, coffee cup empty and stomach feeling a little warm from the liquid. Jungkook nodded in agreement, and when Sushin returned with their glasses of water, he gave her a warm smile that she returned. Noticing that Yoongi's cup was empty, she quickly refilled it and Yoongi gave her a grateful smile before bringing the steaming liquid to his mouth to swallow. Oh yeah. Jungkook perked up, putting his glass of water down after taking a sip from it, and picked up his phone again. You don't know what he looks like? Yoongi poked about Jungkook, watching as the boy scrolled through his phone. I know what Namjoon Hyung looks like, so you should see Jiminy. I mean, you're going to see him anyway, but I think you should be prepared. He smiled sheepishly, finding what he wanted on his phone before he passed it to Yoongi, sliding it across the table. Yoongi glanced from the phone to Jungkook and back to the phone. He put his coffee cup down, after a moment, and picked up the device, bringing it close to his face to see. There was a picture of someone, but then his phone accidentally pressed against the screen, and the picture was gone, leaving him with a series of messages he didn't think to not read. Angel. You're hard to resist, Cookie, so I'm sure you'll be just fine. I'm not even sure how I'm supposed to take that. Angel. Oh shush, you know what I mean. Angel. Bam Bam said his phone lost signal, so I guess we don't have much time. So I'm going to show you my face one more time. Because I don't remember what it looks like. Angel. Shut up, you know you want it. Angel. Send me your face, Cookie. There was a little thumbnail of a picture Jungkook obviously took while they were still in the car, and Yoongi had not even noticed the boy took it. Given the angle, Yoongi could even see himself at the side of Jungkook. Savor it. Angel. Savoring. And you're right, he's so cute. Where's mine, huh? Angel. I thought you didn't want it. I didn't say that, arsehole. Angel. You know you love me. You know you want me. Angel. Incoming. Yoongi's heart was in his throat, and he quickly tapped at the picture Jimin had sent, assuming it was the one Jungkook was trying to show him in the first place. He was attacked by a bright smile and vibrant hair, and he had to blink a few times before he could focus on exactly what he was seeing. Jimin, so he assumed, had taken the picture rather well. A mirror in the background, but Yoongi was focused on that smile. It spread across his face, showing off his white teeth, bunching up his cheeks and turning his eyes into crescents. It was a bright smile, the kind of smile that made Yoongi a little breathless. His skin was slightly tanned, and he was wearing a dark sweater that hung off one shoulder, showing a rather nice collarbone. His hair was copper orange, obviously dyed, but cut and styled rather well. It suited him, and brought out his smile all the more. He was gorgeous. It wasn't even fur. Told you, Jungkook chuckled softly, peering at Yoongi with a knowing smile over his coffee cup. That's a lot to take in person, so I thought you should be prepared. Yoongi swallowed the lump in his throat and quickly pushed Jungkook's phone back across the table. He's gorgeous. Okay, he didn't actually mean to say that out loud. He is, Jungkook nodded in agreement, a light flush curling to his cheeks as he glanced at his phone and then stuffed it away in his pocket. Was it even fair for two gorgeous people to be in a relationship with each other? It was too much. Yoongi wasn't sure if he could handle seeing them together, because that was a lot of bright gorgeousness at one time, and he didn't know if his fragile heart could take it. God, he was a troll compared to the two of them. Luckily, Suchin came back then with her arms full of a platter carrying their food. Jungkook made a noise of happiness as she set out all the side dishes, and then their bowls of japchae in front of them. She gave them fresh packs of chopsticks, and refilled Yoongi's coffee again before leaving them to their meal. The two of them fell into silence as they ate, more focused on filling their empty bellies than any type of conversation. At some point, Cypher finished his meal and curled up against Yoongi's thigh. The diner was full of light conversation. Silverware clacking and eating. It was calming in a way, and Yoongi was kind of lost in the taste of his japchae. It reminded him of the dish his mother used to make, and that made something like sadness curl into his chest, but he kept eating because it was damn good. Jungkook wasn't the neatest eater, but he ate deliciously, savouring every little bit like it might be his last. By the time all the bowls and dishes were empty, Yoongi felt like his stomach might explode. Suchin returned with a smile and asked if there was anything else they needed. They both shook their heads, and Yoongi asked for the bill instead. She brushed that off with a warm smile and a bow, telling them to take care of each other before gathering up their dishes on a platter and moving off to take them away. Ah, that was so good, Jungkook mumbled, sinking in his seat and rubbed at his stomach through his clothing. Yoongi nodded in agreement and finished off his last mouthful of warm coffee. He was still tired. He could feel the sluggishness in his limbs, but his mind felt more alert than before. He could still use a few hours' sleep, and he was about to suggest the motel across the street to Jungkook when a strange rumbling sound suddenly filled the diner. People's heads snapped up and everything went quiet. For a moment, Yoongi thought it was an earthquake, but then he noticed the sounds of music and laughter. Jungkook tilted his head at Yoongi before he slid along the roof to press against the window, shifting onto his knees to look around outside. Whatever the sound was, it was coming closer, and Yoongi leaned over to look outside the window as well, noticing everyone in the diner was doing the same. Holy shit, it's a parade! Jungkook exclaimed, suddenly clambering out of the roof. The diner patrons made noises of confusion, but Yoongi didn't have a chance to see whatever it was Jungkook saw, because the boy was grabbing at his hands and tugging him out of the booth. Shit, hold on. He grabbed at Cypher and stuffed the kitten in his pocket, petting his head for a moment in apology. Jungkook was grinning, bright and kind of stunning, and grabbed onto Yoongi's hand again to drag him out of the diner. Sure enough, a little ways down the road, in the opposite direction Yoongi and Jungkook had come from the freeway, was a large group of people making their way toward them. At first, Yoongi thought it was a riot and he grabbed at Jungkook's hand, prepared to run. But there was music and laughter coming from the seas of people. The rest of the diner's patrons wandered outside as well, and Jungkook squeezed Yoongi's hand as he bounced on his feet. The music was loud, and he couldn't really find a source. But it was upbeat, and the people dancing and walking along with the group were all smiling, dressed up in vibrant colours. It really did look like a parade, and Yoongi even saw a few clowns. It looked like people were just out to enjoy themselves, and there wasn't a damn thing wrong with that. Daddy! Daddy! Clowns! A little girl beside Yoongi was jumping and pointing, and he recognized her as one of the customers sitting at the counter of the diner. Her father, a handsome young man with a bright smile, picked her up and put her on his shoulders. His eyes met Yoongi for only a second before the man walked off toward the group with his laughing daughter. There had to be over 100 people. Definitely over 100. Maybe even 200, and once the group reached them, it stopped in the road. People were coming out from rooms at the motel, and everyone within hearing distance was coming to see what was going on. The music increased in volume, and people started shouting in happiness, abruptly starting a dance party that made the newcomers laugh in delight. It was bizarre. It was strange. But no one said a word about that. Yoongi watched as people grabbed onto one another and ran into the group, laughing and dancing along to a happy beat. The entire scene made something warm bubble in Yoongi's chest. He was surrounded by so much happiness, and it was contagious. Music thumped through his bones and plucked, trying to spark a fire he thought he had long since lost. The beat made him want to move, but he sure as fuck didn't dance. He just enjoyed watching all these strangers enjoying themselves. The world was ending, so why the fuck couldn't they enjoy themselves? Hyung! Jungkook grabbed onto both his hands and tugged Yoongi into the crowd, walking backwards with a grin on his face. Yoongi shook his head, a smile curling to the corner of his mouth as he pulled out of Jungkook's grip. He was happy to watch, not join in. Jungkook looked disappointed for a moment before he shrugged and skipped off into the crowd, jumping and bouncing along with the beat, clapping his hands happily. Yoongi's eyes were drawn to the boy, the bass line thumping through his system and making his head bob. The smile on Jungkook's face was bright, stretching his lips and showing off all his teeth, including the front two that were just a little big. Bunny teeth. And they were kind of adorable. His face was flushed slightly, from the cold of the exertion of bouncing around with the sea of people. His hair bounced around as well, and he looked like the embodiment of happiness. The entire thing made something hot curl into Yoongi's skin and clawed at his frozen bones, melting away the first layer and making him shiver. Jungkook was beautiful. Absolutely stunning. He watched as the boy laughed, grabbing onto the hands of a little girl and danced around in a circle with her, making her squeal in delight. Yoongi watched as Jungkook was pulled into a group of dancing young girls, and he snorted at the way Jungkook quickly tensed up and bowed his head, backing away from them awkwardly, flushed all the way to his ears. Jungkook returned to him after taking a few deep breaths, and that grin was back, making Yoongi's heart thump painfully in his throat. His eyes were twinkling, and when he grabbed Yoongi's hands this time, the elder didn't stop him. Yoongi had the youth pull him into the crowd, and soon enough they were surrounded, bodies jostling them against one another, so Jungkook's arms went around Yoongi's shoulders to keep him close. The music was loud, people were laughing and shouting, and the atmosphere just screamed warmth. Yoongi didn't dance, but he did shift from side to side, letting Jungkook's arms around his shoulders lead him. He didn't notice how close their faces were at first, or how Jungkook didn't look away from him, honey brown burning into his skin. He was more focused on how easily Jungkook bounced and swayed to the beat, moving Yoongi along with him. The boy was so warm, pressed up against him in the sea of people, and when Yoongi finally glanced up from watching their shoes, his heart slipped down his throat and plopped into his stomach. He was so close. So fucking close. He could smell him. He could smell the hint of soy sauce on his breath from their dinner, and he could smell something deep and dark, like a cologne of some sort. His eyes were so close. Twinkling pools of brown with flecks of gold so full of emotion that Yoongi felt like he was drowning. Someone bumped into his back and Yoongi stumbled forward, knocking his forehead against Jungkook's nose, and he was abruptly aware of how close they were and how much taller the youth was than him. Jungkook just laughed and tightened his arms around Yoongi's shoulders, tucking the elder against his chest and nuzzling against the side of his head. It was too much. It was way too much. Yoongi's heart felt like it was being pushed from the inside out, and the warmth seeping inside his skin from Jungkook was clawing at his bones again, scraping away another frozen layer. His hands twitched, and when he finally grabbed onto the loose fabric of Jungkook's shirt, the youth melted against him, holding him so tightly he almost couldn't breathe. Cypher shifted in his pocket, but the cat didn't escape, and when Yoongi took a step back, Jungkook let him, so the cat could breathe without being squished between their stomachs. And then they were looking at each other again, and something strange was settled on Jungkook's face. Yoongi couldn't read what it was, but those eyes dropped to his lips. At the same time he flicked his tongue out to wet them, and suddenly, Yoongi's knees felt a little weak. He did the only thing he thought he could, other than run away. He pressed his face into Jungkook's shoulder, shuddering at the way the youth held on to him tighter, and nuzzled into his beanie.